Are you trying to dominate your fantasy football league? Do you want so many championship rings it's impossible to sign autographs? Well, crack open a beer, pour yourself a glass of bourbon, and settle in, because you've come to the right place. Welcome to Hammercast.
All right, welcome to the Double D's podcast. And tonight we have a very special guest. I'm excited to have him on. He does great things over at Fantasy Intervention. And we will be discussing our top 12 dynasty rankings for wide receivers in PPR format. So I want to bring him on. He'll introduce himself, tell us what he's working on, where you can find him. So go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Kevin. How's it going, man? Excited to be here. So I think any of you who don't know me, most of my stuff you can find on Twitter. I'm at Daddy's Home FF, kind of probably spending way too much time on the timeline than I should. Always chopping it up with folks. My website we have at Join Our Circle _ that is Fantasy Intervention. Me and Chase Vernon are over there, along with Steffi Smalls and Dave Kluge are your partners on that website. And I'll tell you, Kevin, we have had so much stuff coming out. Like, I am legitimately in shock at the grinding that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have Taylor Connell's knocking out 2 articles for us. The first one is he actually knocked out the fallacy of the third-year breakout. I mean, that was a sick article that he put out. And now he's looking at a head coach's impacts on running back. Should we be fading and things like that? We had 2 articles on Antonio Gibson. You almost have to agree with one because they took the differing approach. And then Jeff Bell, one of our newer writers, is also putting out a retrospective on Drew Brees that I'm told is guaranteed to be a tearjerker, taking a look back on his great career, of course. So honestly, couldn't be prouder to be part of that team. They're absolute rock stars. So I'm just excited to be part of that group and seeing all the cool stuff they have coming out.
Yeah, no, you guys are growing. I remember I talked to Chase maybe over the summer, and we talked about tight ends. We got arguing about tight ends, and ever since then, it seems like he just keeps growing and growing. It's good for him. I'm proud of you guys. You guys are killing it over there.
I appreciate it, man.
So we're going into, our dynasty wide receivers. Now, this may be a little bit too early, but there's never too time to talk about dynasty and going into these things. We're going to start at number 1 and work our way down just because we've kind of talked about it. I think we'll have more agreement at the top, maybe not number 1, but we'll have some agreement. And after it gets past that 6, 7, 8 range, it gets a little muddled. So it'll be interesting to see what you got. Who'd you got number 1? Who's your dynasty wide receiver number 1 going into the season?
Yeah, so as I told you earlier, number 1 is where I judge people. There's 2 types of people. There's people that know how to play fantasy football and don't. And the people that know how to play fantasy football, whether they're looking redraft, whether they're looking dynasty, whether they're looking at any format that includes trying to score points. Now, if you're not trying to score points, you don't want this guy. But if you're trying to score points, the only answer is Davante Adams. He is in a tier by himself. And what's going to happen is you're going to get him for these hot names, right? We're going to go over all of them, but people are going to talk about how old a man who turned 28 a month ago is. That's what they're going to talk about. By the end of your season, guess what? He's still going to be 28. He's still going to be tied to that Hall of Fame quarterback, the guy who honestly might have had the best year of his career. He had 4 points per game average over the wide receiver 2. Realistically, for me, there's 3 guys in fantasy football right now that are true position advantages. Ever since CMC went down, the only place you get positional advantages is Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Davante Adams. And those are the only 3 guys that I'm going to pay a king's ransom for over anybody else. So I'm talking about my wide receiver 2 plus to grab Davante Adams. He's my dude.
Okay. Yeah. Does the Rodgers thing worry you at all? Is if Rodgers comes back? I mean, he's probably coming back. His contract's up, but does that the age or anything like that?
So his contract's not up. It's actually the dead money that people are quoting right now. It's still fairly significant for 2021, a little lower in 2022. But after what he just did, I don't see any way that Jordan Love is getting a shot with the Packers. I mean, they're looking at now a 3 to 4 year window where honestly they could put 2 more rings on their fingers. I don't see how you walked away from that. I don't think Rodgers wants to get away from it. I'm not really worried about anything because honestly, when you look at the way that offense runs, there is nobody that I think they're tied to make that engine go. Even Aaron Jones, that's going to hurt Davante Adams. I just don't see any concern that I have, be it draft capital or free agency, that's going to hurt his production. That's why I love him so much. I think he's flawed.
No, that's valid. I mean, you talked about kind of your wide receivers. He just got traded for Chris Godwin and Kenny Galladay in a league. I would take that all day. I think Devontae Adams is clear cut number one there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just gave up. I want to say it was 2 firsts, a second, and Deontay Johnson at the beginning of the year for Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
And literally haven't lost a second of sleep on that one. I want to say he blew the picks anyway. I don't think one of them was Keyshawn Vaughn, so great job, Frank.
He must have listened to John Bauer before the season started.
I think he did. I think that's the problem, is he was listening to John instead of me. But that was the type of trade that, honestly, when you looked at the beginning of the season, people were like, what were you thinking? I'm like, well, I have Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. I had 3 out of the top 8 picks. I had Travis Kelce and I had DJ Moore. I'm like, Devontae Adams rounds out that team. So basically, I think I traded a bunch of quarters for a dollar bill, and I do that every day of the week because you just don't get those guys that often.
All right, that's fair. I mean, I think you brought up good points. Well, now since I'm going to show you my one, I'm sure you're going to not like me anymore, and we're going to have that conversation.
Let's do it.
My one is AJ Brown, and I might be different than a lot of different people. I think a lot of people out there might disagree with me, but I love AJ Brown. I've kind of done a 180 on him when he came out. He was my wide receiver one coming out, and then he went to Tennessee, and my dumbass was like, oh wait, I can't take AJ Brown. He went to Tennessee, and it really hurt me because now I'm like, that's why now I just do talent over landing spot. I don't care what it is. I think AJ Brown, it can be that wide receiver one. So we're looking at Dynasty. I'm not an ageist by any means, but he's 23. He's put up, as we've seen the last 2 seasons, he's put up, wide receiver 2-ish numbers. He's in that. This year he finished at wide receiver 16 in PPR formats, but he missed the games this season. I think heading forward, I know that they have, Derrick Henry. I know it's more of a run scheme. They are losing probably Corey Davis unless they bring him back. Their tight end position, I think the targets will go to AJ Brown. I'm actually okay with putting him there. I'm interested to see what you think. I mean, target-wise, he got 106 this season. I think realistically, we could see him getting up to 120 next season. But for me, AJ Brown, just the way he plays, I think the system may change a little bit. They lost their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. They could get somebody in there that likes to throw a little bit more. I do like Tannehill. Obviously, he's not Rodgers, but he is a serviceable quarterback. What do you think there?
No, I love AJ Brown. So the next group that I have, and I'm going to have him a little lower in that group, but honestly, we're starting to get to that razor thin 2 to 6 range after I get by Adams. So it's razor thin. I love Brown. What's amazing is when you look at his stat line, if it wasn't for that midseason case of the drops, I mean, it would be even better than what we're looking at now, which is still a spectacular season. He's a physical freak. Absolutely love Tannehill. I love the fact that we might even be looking at more opportunity for him if Corey Davis were to leave in free agency, which I think is a very real possibility. So I love it. I like I said, I have that next tier, and he's going to be a little lower for me in that tier. But honestly, the biggest struggle I had was 2 to 6 because at that point you're talking about give me number 6 and a 3rd round pick for number 2. Like they all just kind of blend for me.
Okay. No, I mean, hey, I think, like you said, I love Adams, but like you said, I think 2 to 6 for me too. It's kind of that range. I'm like, hey, where am I at? Where am I going to put these guys? I think Brown just steps up for me because I think he's the best receiver, and I think he's better than DK Metcalf. So for me going forward, if I can get 5 or 6 years of production from Brown at 23, and where he's at compared to maybe Adams, where he's got 2 top year. I mean, hey, I'm all about winning money, so I'm okay with taking Adams for 2 years. But if I'm rebuilding or if I'm on a younger team, AJ Brown, I feel like is that dynasty wide receiver one to kind of get. And I wouldn't mind moving Metcalf for AJ Brown straight up.
Sure, and I don't hate that. And my big thing is, I mean, one of the concerns that I have is giving advice is always difficult because when you and I talk rebuild, I think we talk a little differently than some of these dynasty players that are just perpetual rebuilds because they're constantly trading like Devontae Adams for Justin Jefferson. And how many of those points could have gotten you to the playoffs, could have given you a crack at it. Now, I do see in the chat to see my homie Hammer Jacks. What's up, buddy? He knows, huge fan. Absolutely, people were saying this about Thomas last year. Now, the difference being a few things. Number one, the basically limited route tree that you have with Thomas. Number two, you knew you were coming to the end with Drew Brees. Michael Thomas was always a win-now play for this coming year. And when he bombed out, you were losing so much of that. I think that I had Devontae Adams number 1 last year as well. And the reason being was because I think he's a more talented receiver and I have a lot more faith in Aaron Rodgers. But I certainly agree that a lot of people were touting the same thing with Michael Thomas. And had you gone with obviously what you could have gotten at the time, which would have been AJ Brown plus
Yeah.
for Michael Thomas, you'd be much better off right now. I just think Devontae Adams, when you look at the type of player he is, I always thought that Michael Thomas was more volume dependent. He was more game script dependent. There was a lot more to it that causes issues for a wide receiver. And that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think you brought up a good point with Metcalf, where AJ Brown runs a little bit more of a diverse route tree than Metcalf does. So I don't hate that comparison. Well, I personally think I would take Metcalf because he has something that people don't have, which is this weird, massive human being who can, run that speed. I think they're both kind of those physical freaks.
Yeah.
But I do think that the diverse route tree makes a difference in who you're tied to. And I agree, I actually love Tannehill. So overall, like I don't hate this pick at all. I'm going to be a lot lower in the rankings, but I want to make sure we're clear that we're not that far off between two.
No, and I think with Dynasty, everything fluctuates, right, guys? Like Michael Thomas last year, look at what he was supposed to be. I love Devontae for the reason. I think that he's a great pure receiver. Michael Thomas is kind of, like you said, scheme dependent, and that kind of works. Let's go to your two then. You said 2 to 6 was tough, so I want to see. Where do you got at number 2?
Yeah, 2 to 6 was real tough, man. Like real tough. Number 2 for me, though, again, you're going to see a pattern. I will give up a couple years for guaranteed production. So number 2 for me is going to be Tyreek Hill. The reason why I have Tyreek Hill coming in at number 2 is that he added something this year, which is the consistency that everybody was worried about the previous year. So if you looked at Tyreek Hill, he was doing a lot of boom or bust type plays. Yeah. And what he brought to the table this year was every game but one, he hit double digits. Like that wasn't what we saw last year. You were seeing a lot of what I would call the wide receiver, what used to be Aaron Rodgers games, where Rodgers would do all of it in, like an 8 game and the final result would look great. Yeah. But, Amari Cooper type players, that was what Tyreek Hill was. Now they're getting him shorter passes. He's not just that deep threat. They're getting him, bubble screens. They're doing end arounds with him. They're getting the ball in his hands so consistently that he's bankable. And when you look at the explosion that he has, and he's still going to have those 40-point games, when you can rely on the 10 to 15 a week with the opportunity that he's going to win you 4 or 5 games on his own, like you have to love that type of return. Now you are talking, 4 years older than some of the guys we're going to mention. But in reality, when you look at Dynasty, and I've tried to study this as best I can, I tend to think that you roster people for about 3.5 years. And to be quite honest, your league probably the last 5.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky. So you're talking about Tyreek Hill coming in at 31 years old, Pat Mahomes being just about the same age. There's no reason that that's not going to pay out for you. And I see Rob Norton in the chat saying the same thing. It's legitimately Tyreek Hill and Pat Mahomes will probably be playing together longer than your league exists.
Yeah.
And I love that payout. So there's no risk of, like you said, if Aaron Rodgers gets cut for dead money, Drew Brees' arm goes dead, what happens with Tannehill? Realistically, you're probably looking at the Reed, the enemy, Mahomes, Hill combination for longer than your league's going to exist. So I just love that. Again, guarantee, maybe I'm a little risk averse, but my top 2 are almost as bankable as you get.
No, that's true. Mine is Tyreek Hill too, so we're on the right page there. I love Tyreek. Before the beginning of the year, I wrote at Hammercast.com. I wrote an article about Dynasty Mount Rushmore wide receivers. He was my number 1, just because going into the year, I just love this year for me is his targets, man. 135 targets this year, and he missed a game. And last year he saw 89, the year before 137. And I even wrote, I said, hey, if he can match that 2018 kind of consistency and where he was at, he's that guy for the next couple of years. And everything you said is agreeable. I believe that. And I just love how they got him involved. Crossing routes, they got him to, end arounds, anything there. And I think one other area is his rushing ability. I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, but they love to give him the ball. He had a couple called back this year I watched because I have him on my rosters everywhere. And so I was frustrated as hell. But, he's out there. And I just love, like you said, you can't not go down. If you look at who throws him the ball, Patrick Mahomes is, the Konami code, just cheat sheet. That's your guy that you want on your team. And when you look at his ceiling, I think his ceiling is about that 2018 year when he had 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns. I think he can get there again. And the only worry I have, I guess, the only thing I was thinking of is I think the Chiefs could draft a wide receiver in this studded wide receiver class. A couple guys I really like, Diami Brown from North Carolina. I even saw Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. So, like, if they do get someone that's a little bit more of an upgrade over Robinson and McCole Hardman, who, McCole Hardman, the most overrated receiver that we've seen in the last 2 years in dynasty formats. I still think, even though that, I still take talent, right? So for me, talent outweighs that, and I'm going to take Tyreek Hill every day at that number 2 spot.
Yeah, so I definitely see what you're saying about the rookies, but just here's a thought for us to think of, right, is that you're talking about a 31-year-old tight end right now that's putting up the numbers. By the time the rookie ramps up, you're probably going to see him ramping down. And like you said, Demarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins, there's still targets there to go around. I mean, this is a high-octane offense. So I'm not too concerned about the volume dropping off. While it might a little bit, I think it might be counteracted, obviously, with Kelsey eventually showing his age. Hasn't yet. But at some point. But I will say you probably I'll share you with the roster afterwards, but you'd probably be real happy with I did a startup this year and I built my team, Superflex Dynasty, around Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and A.J. Brown. And I could not be happier of how I started that thing off. It was like, here we go, let's make this happen. Filled it in with like a David Montgomery type, DJ Moore, Irv Smith. Like, I love the team, but that core, that 3, I paid through the nose to line up those 3 because I think they're just complete difference makers.
No, they are. And that's what you want in your teams, is difference makers. Okay, if you roll out those guys, it's way better than rolling out, Juju and all these other guys that you can draft in the 5th and 6th. I like Juju, don't get me wrong, but he's not these guys. No, I agree. I like that. And the thing about Tyreek too, but really quick, I don't want to agree too much, but just Mahomes' ability to get outside the pocket and create for a guy like Tyreek, and Tyreek's ability to stay open and his speed, that separates him too. Those 2 guys have great chemistry when it comes to broken plays and getting open, and you got to love to see that. So that's kind of mine. Who's you got at 3 then? Because I want to make sure we disagree a little bit. Who you got at 3?
Yeah, so number 3 is interesting, right? And I want to thank you for this. I don't tend to do rankings a ton. I do them for shows, and there's always that time, right? There's always that spot where basically what we have is we have the from Wormtown, dropped it. But what we have is there's always one guy that I didn't expect to be as high as I am, and that's this guy. I have number 3, I have DK Metcalf. Okay. And the reason why I didn't expect Metcalf to be this high is, to be quite honest, like, just eye test, I don't have Metcalf anywhere. I wasn't paying a ton of attention to him. And I thought he was less consistent. I thought that we had more Lockett than we did. I saw a couple of Lockett's boom games. I think he might have had 2. But Metcalf realistically was far more consistent than I expected him to be. He had a huge year, silenced everybody. I still am a little nervous. I want him to become a red zone threat. I am scared to death of Adam Gase. These Adam Gase.
I was going to say that.
I might drop him to 10. But realistically, in doing the research, I expected to come in on Metcalf about 6.
Yeah.
And after going through it, after you and I talked, after you sent me the shows cheat sheet a couple of days ago, I couldn't. I just couldn't drop him, even though I wanted to. He's not necessarily a player that I love, but looking at it, I'm like, oh, dang, like, he's better than I thought. So I slotted him in at number 3. Again, razor thin between 2 and 6, but that's where I went Metcalf, just because I fooled myself in the research, which was actually a great thing. I love learning rather than being right. And in this case, I learned that I was probably too low on Metcalf.
Yeah, I know. And, I think for everybody listening on the podcast, one thing is, when you're in Dynasty, it's always important to not stick to your takes and your guns and like, hey, where is Metcalf? Because Metcalf was a guy that I was like, I'm not sure what he can be. And in this year, look what he's done. And to put in perspective, now I will say my 3rd is Metcalf too. Everybody out here, plus, trust me, we did not do this. Like, I made sure I didn't know his before I asked mine. But when I kind of went over it, I was like, you know what? I have to put Metcalf there. I mean, just what he's been able to do. Him and Russell Wilson have a great connection. Tied to Russell Wilson's not a bad spot, even though they had a kind of a down second half of the season. I think that was more because of the running game and other stuff. And Lockett doesn't scare me as much anymore. I think, we'll talk about it later, but Lockett's a sell for me right now because I feel like he's just not consistent enough. And for Metcalf, he's in the top half of contested catch rate. He's more than just a deep ball threat too. I do think that Brown is more technical, but Metcalf has shown some consistency and some okay route running, a little bit more than what we thought I'd come out of college. I know everybody had the 3-cone drill joke about the poor guy. But, what we see from him is just, I think, consistency, right? Like, he's been very consistent receiver the last 2 years, just in terms of that offense. But again, the offense is in flux. I was going to ask you about it. I'm glad you brought it up. If Gase is there, I'm going to cry into my tears, because I actually, on a rebuilding team, I traded him not straight up. I traded him for a second and Devontae Adams. So I'm rebuilding. So I took Metcalf and I said, you know what, I'm going to go with Metcalf here. And just the targets. I mean, he had 129 targets this year, 1,300 yards. I mean, guys, you can't go wrong with Metcalf. I think he's in that top tier as a dynasty wide receiver. And again, he's young. He's 23. He's in that kind of same band as Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that honestly, with Gase, with Gase possibly coming in, realistically, then the question is, you have to guess right. Like every offseason, and I love talking about this, these pivot guys.
Yeah.
Like every offseason you have these pivot guys. We did a whole podcast on it, actually. Like Aaron Jones is a perfect example. If you bet right on Aaron Jones, you win. Now that might be sell him for a first right now, or that might be buy him for a low first and he lands in Arizona and all of a sudden he's worth 3 firsts and he's a top 2 running back for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I think Metcalf in this situation is huge, because once the Gase news comes out, I'm buying like a champion at a discount. So anybody who gets an offer from me when the Gase news comes out, say no. I promise you're making a mistake, because I think it'll affect him not much, but I think the public perception will wildly overcorrect on him. You'll be able to get, him plus for A.J. Brown, like him plus a high second for A.J. Brown. I'd make that deal even with Gase in town.
Yeah, I mean, I don't put too much credence. If he's the offensive coordinator, there's still going to be, you still have the head coach. You got Carroll there. I don't see as much, but yeah, that's exactly true. I love those ideas where you pivot and how you do it, because that's really what sets you apart, dynasty owners. How you pivot when those guys, like Zeke right now is a pivot guy for me. I'm going to buy Zeke, but that's because I'm a Cowboy fan and an idiot. But I really think he has one good year left where he can kind of do that. Metcalf would be that guy too. I would try to buy, because I think Metcalf is scheme. He's not scheme dependent. I think he's just that good. So no matter what Gase is doing out there, I still think that he's going to consistently be a top 5 receiver in the NFL. And that's kind of where I'm at. Now, this next one, I know that you and me are different, because you've already mentioned this guy. So who do you got for number 4?
Number 4, I have DeAndre Hopkins. Okay. I am going to go with those arrogant hands. My opinion of DeAndre Hopkins is simple. If we had this podcast week 3 prior to Kyler Murray's injury, we would have had him in the top 2. He was lighting the world on fire. His targets, his catches, everything about him screamed wide receiver 1. Absolute stud. You saw what he did with the Hail Mary catch against Buffalo. Like, what this guy can do is insane. Now, what happened is when Kyler Murray hurt his shoulder, what we learned was that he wasn't running as much. They were trying to protect that shoulder. Yeah. Kyler Murray is just not a good enough pocket passer to sustain a high-octane offense. And DeAndre Hopkins was hurt by that really more than anybody else. You saw a little more from Kirk. Obviously, you saw Kenyon Drake all of a sudden starting to become a consistent running back, as much as we all hated him before that. Now, I think when Murray gets better, I think one more year in the Kingsbury offense, I think Hopkins is going to be possibly the discount of the offseason, because you are looking at a guy talent-wise that is literally beyond reproach. Like, he is in that Devontae Adams tier talent-wise, and I think that offense all comes together. So I am looking to buy Hopkins everywhere I can, because I know beyond a shadow of the doubt that I'm one of the few people that is going to have him in my top 4. Yeah. That people are going to be selling Hopkins plus to get Jefferson. They're going to be selling Hopkins plus to get DK Metcalf. And those are the types of deals that I'm looking to capitalize on. Like, if I could get, just kind of throwing some names out there, if I could get, say, a DeAndre Hopkins and the pick that would turn out to be eventually Kenny Gainwell, Javonte Williams, Rashad Bateman for a DK Metcalf, I'm making that move. It just makes my team better. It gives me not only just as good of a wide receiver, but a chance at a lottery ticket as well. Those are the types of deals that I think can make or break you. And I think Hopkins goes right back into that wide receiver 1 conversation, assuming Murray stays healthy this year.
Okay. No, I mean, hey, I'm an ageist a little bit, so we'll talk about that. Like, I'm not a huge ageist. Like, I hope Dino is not watching, because he got all mad at people today. But for me, would you do this deal? Because this deal just happened on the 9th. So Cam Akers and a late first-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins.
Definitely depends on my roster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would. Let's just say that I'm doing it in a vacuum, like I'm looking to build a team.
Mhm.
Absolutely, and that's no slant on Akers. I love Akers.
Yeah.
Absolutely love Akers. I have Akers as an easy steal and redraft, a second round pick in redraft. But I had a long talk with Zach Reed
Yeah.
um, on online about the fact that I think I overcorrected on running backs, and I've been looking at that, and I'm getting back to looking at building with wide receivers. And I just think Hopkins, realistically, you could talk about being an ageist, you can talk about the age range. A 26 to 27-year-old wide receiver has about the same career length expectancy as a 23-year-old running back does. I mean, when you
Yeah.
look at the window of which they're productive, you're really trying to cash in on that rookie contract, which is 4 to 5 years, right? And a 27-year-old wideout, you should expect production up to 32. So I
Yeah.
think you're looking at about the same time frame. You can expect them to produce at a high level, and I think Hopkins has done it before. And I think the Rams scare the hell out of me. I don't know what they're doing, who their quarterback's going to be. That offense scares me because they're really in flux right now.
No, I mean, I'm a zero running back guy, so you're talking to my heart right now. Like, everybody hates me, but that's how that's what I do. I build my team's wide receiver out, and then like I get guys like David Montgomery and other guys that kind of fill that role, and I'll hit on some rookie running backs. Hopefully, I hit on James Robinson this year, but that was just luck. I'm not that good, guys. But like, when you do that, another deal, like kind of what you were mentioning, DeAndre Hopkins in a second for Allen Robinson in a first, and that's kind of that deal that you kind of mentioned where you could move Allen Robinson in probably a late first for DeAndre Hopkins at a second. I still think that's pretty good value for Hopkins with if he can finish in that top 5.
Yeah, so I'd make that move all day, every day. I think you have so much in flux with Robinson, and I love Allen Robinson. He's actually funny when we're talking about potential buys at the end of the show. He's one of them.
Yeah.
Allen Robinson to me is what Brandon Marshall was when I started playing. Brandon Marshall was a wide receiver. Oh, you remember him? He's a stud.
Yeah, I loved him.
Nobody wanted to admit he was a wide receiver 1. He was always, he wasn't flashy. He just did it. That's what Allen Robinson is. So I love him as a buy.
Yeah.
Now, that said, that's not a big downgrade in picks to go up to DeAndre Hopkins, who's just a different cat.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct there. My 4th is our guy, Devontae Adams. I didn't have him that far, so don't yell at me. So I have him in my top 4. Like, I feel like I look at my rankings as almost tiers, like you kind of talked about. For me, I feel like these top 4 guys can kind of be intermixed, to be honest with you. I would like either one of these guys. Devontae going forward, he's with Rodgers. As long as he's with Rodgers, I think he holds his value extremely well. If Jordan Love is throwing passes, trust me, I'm a Debbie guy, and I do not have any Jordan Love out there, guys. I don't know what Jordan Love's going to be, but I am not betting my money on that. So, if that ever does happen, I think Adams can go down, but especially with what he's doing this year. I mean, what he's put up, like you already mentioned, so I'm not going to go too much detail about it. He's been the wide receiver 1 in football, just best wide receiver, not even in terms of fantasy. I mean, that guy can just flat out play. So if you have him on your roster and you're building, I would keep him, especially because I think he's going to hit peak value next year. And then that's kind of when you have to make that decision. Okay, like we talked about, tilting players, where's that going to be? Who are pivoting? That might be next year's pivot. But for now, I think you have to keep him in that top 5.
Yeah, and like you talked about, what you want to keep an eye on is Aaron Rodgers' contract. He's definitely there for 2021, just dead money alone. 2022 is really the year that if anything would happen to Allen Robinson, Aaron Rodgers, I'm going back to the previous question, you could move away from him. And I think that's where I would be a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
But, man, did he answer the bell. I mean, what does he have, 50 touchdowns now and 10 interceptions across all his games played? It's insane. So if he's going to put those numbers up, they're going to ride into the sunset with him as the quarterback. But you're getting, like you said, one guaranteed more year of Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers in this offense, in this setup, which I love. And then you absolutely want to be taking a look at, especially as you come into like week 11, are you a competitor? And then try to predict the future on Green Bay. That's when you make the move, not now.
Yep, and that's the fun part about Dynasty. That's the exciting part. What are you going to do with him? All right, let's go to that number 5 range. Who you got? I'm interested to see what you got because I'm coming on some rookies now, or some first-year guys. So I want to see where you're at.
Man, are we going to be the same again? Because number 5, I'm going Justin Jefferson.
Okay, yeah, that's mine too. So we might as well just talk them together. Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, so Justin Jefferson, I know that it's funny because I actually expected – I wrote up my argument for why I have him so low. I expected to have him higher.
No.
So many people have him as a wide receiver 1. Now,
that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, anyone who's ever heard me knows I have one particular stat that I love. Do you want to hear my favorite stat?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Kirk Cousins can't play on the road. Plain and simple. So did you know every one of Justin Jefferson's touchdowns was caught in Minnesota?
I was not aware of that.
Every single one of them. Did you know that every one of Kirk Cousins' 3 touchdown games, with the exception of week 2, were in Minnesota? In the fact that he had 3 touchdowns every dang home game leading up to week 15. I haven't checked since because I haven't had to go live since. But Kirk Cousins was only a home guy. So when you look at Jefferson, that's what scares me, is that Cousins struggles on the road. Yeah. Jefferson drops a little bit at that point. I still love Adam Thielen. It's not enough to keep him out of my top 5, but it's enough to say, no, we're gonna calm the hype a little bit. Yeah. People went a little overcorrection. Great rookie season, like unbelievable rookie season. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and put him all the way up to the top. He's just not there for me because of those home road splits. Top 5 is spectacular for a rookie, but not number 1 for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have Jefferson a lot of places because a lot of guys were down on him. I mean, people were taking Rieger and Ruggs ahead of him in those rookie drafts, and I was just laughing because I was just taking Jefferson. I'm in too many leagues. I have like 8 shares of Justin Jefferson out there just because, hey, you know what? They just kept falling, and I just kept getting them. I agree with you on terms of like where he's at in terms of Kirk Cousins. Just God, isn't he just like the epitome of just average, just good fantasy quarterback, just not a very good NFL quarterback. I worry about that now. I did see a mock this year, and I really love Trey Lance from North Dakota State, and I saw him going to Minnesota. I don't know if he's going to last that long, but if they could somehow move their way up to get maybe a rookie, a quarterback or just a better quarterback, maybe next year or the year after, then obviously his value is going to fluctuate. But I still think he's in that top 5 range. He's 5th for me as well. The great thing about him is he's top 15 in drops this year, so that means that's actually a good thing. He doesn't drop the ball. He's got sure hands. His route running is amazing. Again, I think he's not scheme dependent. I think he can do very well depending on who he's got throwing the ball and what offense is he in. Especially, look, he's in a Dalvin Cook offense and where they like to run the ball. But the thing for me is he was just going to replace Diggs' targets. So I wrote an article before the season started. I said, you need to grab Justin Jefferson even in redraft because of where those targets are going to go. They got to go to somebody. I remember they were talking BZ Johnson was going to be that guy. What are you talking about? What is happening out there, Dynasty guys? Like Justin Jefferson was always going to be that dude. And for me, if you have him, you're playing with house money because I don't see his value really depreciating in the next couple of years. So you're going to always have a wide receiver 1 that either you can move, you can use for assets, or whatever you want to do.
So here's the interesting thing about Jefferson, and I love talking this particular thing because you brought up the name of Juju Smith-Schuster, who fit this corollary well.
Yeah.
Now, Justin Jefferson, what you have to look at when you're valuing Jefferson is what is Adam Thielen doing to Justin Jefferson. Now, you could look at the obvious, which a lot of people do. Adam Thielen is taking away red zone targets. Adam Thielen was the red zone guy for the Minnesota Vikings. Plain and simple, no questions asked. When you look at those red zone looks, they're looking at Adam Thielen. Now you can say, well, Justin Jefferson is going to go up in value if Thielen were to leave. And he is getting older, obviously. He's hitting that 30-year mark. But then there's the flip side of it, which is Adam Thielen takes a lot of the coverage away from Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
He allows him to get open. Now, if you look at what everyone was saying about Juju Smith-Schuster, remember 2 years ago with Antonio Brown leaves, Juju automatically becomes a top 5 because look at what he was as a wide receiver too. Well, now all of a sudden the coverage has rotated your way. You're all of a sudden either getting a Stephon Gilmore type cornerback or you're getting bracket coverage, you're getting a rolled over top safety. That changes the dynamic. So again, when we talk about Justin Jefferson, the goal, and I'm not going to tell you what the answer is because to be quite honest, I'm not even certain.
Yeah.
But you have to predict with no Adam Thielen, does that mean more touchdowns for Justin Jefferson or does that mean more difficult coverage? And how does that affect his value? Be smart about that. Don't go with the obvious right in front of your face, which is Thielen leaves 8 more touchdowns for Jefferson. That ain't how it works. It's never worked. It's never been that way. But if you can predict properly, which means, well, maybe he's going to get more difficult coverage, but he's going to get 4 more touchdowns and let's say 200 less yards. Well, if you do the math, you've gained points in that.
Yeah.
So that's really where it comes out to what does his long-term outlook. It depends on which way it falls.
Yeah, I think that's valid too. When you're looking at what he did in college, he did it next to Jamar Chase too. So anyway, everybody, he's my wide receiver 1 out there, all you just BMI people. But when you're looking at like, so don't come at me. When you're looking at that type of scenario, I think that's true. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So this trade just went down yesterday in the league. Justin Jefferson straight up for Jonathan Taylor.
Wow,
that's a big boy trade.
Yeah, so I love Jonathan Taylor, man. I love Jonathan Taylor. So I'm gonna go Taylor.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you why. I'm a trader. I am a day trader. Guys don't stay on my roster more than like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I get bored. And I think that realistically, when you look at it, when you look at what Jonathan Taylor is gonna show, you could get one of our wide receivers that we have in this range, plus for Jonathan Taylor, the second that somebody's running back goes down. So I
Yeah.
agree. Taylor's girlfriend is right. At the end of the year, I want Justin Jefferson on my roster. However, when you're looking at someone like me and you're looking at value and you're looking for those panic moves, I want Jonathan Taylor to start the year because I think they're fairly close in value, and that's going to make me lean running back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to move him for a Jefferson type. Now, I know a lot of people, when I brought up my conversation with Zach and Mike Liu, saying that doesn't really happen as much in his leagues. In my home league, it does.
Yeah.
So know your league. If you can't pull that off, then Jefferson's your guy just because you have longer term value.
Yeah, and I think there's still a mindset. I mean, there's degenerates like us who know where values kind of lie, and we're smart when we kind of trade. There's other people that just kind of, I need a running back, and so they're willing to give up more. And when I'm like, nah, I just go pick up, whoever off the waiver wire and have Justin Jefferson on my roster. So I think it just kind of depends on your league, like you said. But like, not everybody, we forget sometimes that not everybody is. If people listen to this podcast, you might just be just an average fantasy football player, which is fine. Your wife probably loves me, loves you more than me. My wife does. So there is that. We're degenerates. So when you're looking at that, you always got to keep that in perspective.
Oh yeah. 98% of the people that play fantasy football are not on Twitter. Just be aware of that. Yeah. 98% of them ain't here.
But 99% of the arguments are all on Twitter. You just got to find it out there.
Exactly. But the answer is, at the end of the day, to answer your question, I went very roundabout to answer this.
Yeah.
You want the wide receiver as your building block, 100%. Now, could you make the move, get more? It's a gamble. You're rolling the dice. But in the end, you want Jefferson as the guy on your roster. I just wouldn't make that move in this particular offseason.
That's fair. All right. So number 6. Let's see if we agree or not. What do you got at number 6?
Oh, we don't agree because I have your number 2.
Okay, good.
Yeah, A.J. Brown. We talked about him. Wasn't for the case of the drops. He'd be an absolute stud. So he's my number 6 right now.
Okay. So that's fair. One thing that for me, when I was looking at my number 6, I had a hard time not putting this guy number 5 but I felt like maybe I had a Dallas bias, and maybe a little higher than you think your guy is. But mine is CeeDee Lamb. And I actually have him as a top 6 wide receiver asset right now. And the reason why is when you're looking at CD and when I'm looking at CD in terms of what he did with Dak. So the thing is, I was wanting to see where Dak was because, as a Cowboy fan, and if you were watching him this year, Ben DiNucci, Andy Dalton's, carcass out there trying to toss balls, he was going to struggle. But when the first 5 weeks when Dak was healthy, CD put up top. He was ranked number 11 in PPR formats. And he was averaging 17 points a game. So when you're looking at it from my perspective, what I'm looking for is forward with Dak. Hopefully they should re-sign him. Jerry's not that dumb. Trust me, he's really not. He better not be. So they're going to re-sign Dak. And even with those quarterbacks I was talking about, he still had a 23-point fantasy game, 16, and 19. So he was still throwing those games in there, but consistently they just weren't getting him the balls enough. He still had 111 targets. And I think moving forward in Dynasty as a Dallas fan and everything, I think Cooper's gone after next season. So CD's the wide receiver 1 in Dallas, and I love Gallup too, but I think he's going to be forward. CD's going to be that guy. And moving forward, him and Dak for the next 3 or 4 years, I just love that value. That's just my opinion.
I absolutely love it. And I am in agreement that Cooper's gone. If not next year, might be gone, this coming year. Realistically, Cooper's not long for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the problem is that my love for Michael Gallup, it puts me in a little bit of an issue. And the other guy that I have in my notes, and we'll get to it with CeeDee Lamb, is the jersey you have behind you coming back. I think when you look at Pollard coming into the offense, I agree. Jerry can't be that stupid. Dak has to come back.
Yeah.
And that I will have CeeDee Lamb, so I don't want to spoil it. I will have CeeDee Lamb coming up. But I have him a little lower, and I think, honestly, it is my love for Michael Gallup that does that. I think that they're going to put together a potent 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
But that's going to keep Lamb out of the Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill stratosphere because it will be a 1-2 punch and not a target hog type situation.
I'm glad I found someone else that loves Gallup as much as me because I have Gallup in every damn league I'm in. I'm just waiting.
Everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah, I am not giving up. I got so many lowball offers, and I'm like, bro, you
No.
better bring like 2 firsts. I'm not getting away from Michael Gallup.
And he falls, and he just falls, and I'm just like, I have to take him. Like, there's nothing I can do there. And when I'm looking at it from that perspective, I think Gallup's the clear number 2 on that team. I've always thought he was the second best receiver. Even this year, I said, hey, they got to get Gallup more opportunities. So I get that they're pairing them together, but I think that they can coexist because in that offense, I think they are going to throw a lot with Dak. I mean, Dak was the QB1 in first 4 weeks of the season. So I think offensively with Kellen Moore staying, I still think there's consistency there. Again, that's why I do have CD at 6 though. And I think that's why I kept him below Justin this time, because I go back and forth on these 2 guys all the time. It's just because, like you said, I think Thielen is there, but I think Jefferson is the better athlete. Mm-hmm. Gallup is damn good receiver, and I would take Gallup over Thielen right now, to be honest with you, in Dynasty, just because that's how much I love Gallup.
Oh, and I agree 100%. And I actually just tried to get Dak. I couldn't believe they said no. I offered Baker Mayfield number 12 and number 13 for Dak Prescott, thinking like, hey, maybe people forgot how good he was. And I was trying to pair him with Mahomes on that team I was telling you about. And I'm like, I wouldn't lose a damn game. Unfortunately, Rich, my boy Dynasty Island, is too smart for me and wouldn't take it. But I was really hoping that was going to get it done, because I think Dak comes back and immediately goes into those top 4 quarterbacks, like right off the bat.
Yeah, he's going to crush it. He's the guy I was forgetting about, and he's going to be there. So, all right, well, who's your number 7 then? Who you got at 7?
So number 7 is a guy that I literally am going to get into fights over. So any of you in the comment section that want to say anything, my let's do this, because number 7 is DJ Moore.
Okay.
And let's be clear, because I know everybody loves recency stuff. DJ Moore is a Kirk Cousins away from making Justin Jefferson look like a wide receiver too. This is a guy who has put up 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns with Kyle Allen and freaking Teddy Bridgewater. This is an absolute stud that people forget how good he is, and he is an absolute beast of a wide receiver. If we can put DJ Moore in a line with any quarterback, no, never mind the latest rumor from Ian Rappaport that it's going to be Deshaun Watson, which would put DJ Moore in the top 4, by the way, for anyone who's paying attention. But DJ Moore is legitimately, he could get just an average quarterback and he's going to explode. He's that dude. He's that talent. He's that prospect that we're waiting for coming out of college that landed in the wrong situation. And once they get that corrected, which they will, he is going to be an absolute rocket ship. So what I will tell you is, if I was starting an NFL franchise and I was going to pick a wide receiver, you damn well sure I'm taking DJ Moore over Justin Jefferson. So you just get me just a Kirk Cousins and put him in Carolina, and DJ Moore takes off. So this is a guy that people are sleeping on right now. He is your top buy for me when we start talking buys, because again, I know that no one's going to have him at number 7 like they should. But I love me some DJ Moore. And by the way, he's still younger than some of your rookies that you have coming out this year.
Yeah, no, hey, you're not going to get an argument with me. I don't have him this high, but I love him. And I thought I had him too high. I thought I was going to yell, but apparently you're the DJ Moore guy. Before the season started, I had DJ Moore as one of my Dynasty Mount Rushmore guys, just because I love the offense he was in with Brady, just because I knew they were going to use him. And when you look at his perspective, he has a catch rate before the season started at about 13.5 yards per catch. And that was with Will Grier, Kyle Allen, and Cam Newton. And we saw what that did. This year is kind of the same concept like you talked about. I still think in his yards after catch ability and the things that he can do, if they would just get him the ball, would be incredible. Like I could honestly, Moore is one of those guys I think could be a top 5 next year if they get a quarterback. I'm just not a Teddy Bridgewater guy. So the problem with me with Teddy Bridgewater is I just don't think he has the ability to get those guys the ball. And he's kind of fallen in love with Anderson.
Oh, and I agree 100%. And this ranking is with an expectation of a quarterback upgrade in the offseason. There's so much smoke there that I have to believe there's fire. Yeah. And there's so much opportunity given the free agent class, given the potential trade market. You could literally put any of the guys that are rumored to move on, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, even Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think that DJ Moore automatically jumps up. And this is a guy, again, we're talking about jumping up, even though he was battling injuries and still put up almost 1,200 yards for the second consecutive year and just turned 23 years old. I mean, he's everything you want in Dynasty, except he doesn't have that sexy name attached to him.
Yeah, I mean, and I think sometimes owners get frustrated with what they did. The thing that I talked about even before, and we saw it this year in Brady's offense, they use a lot of those bunch and snug formation that create mismatches, and that really helps more when he's out there. And they run that in a lot of different routes and formations. They use a lot of 5 wide receiver sets. I think one thing they're going to do next year, depending on their quarterback, is use a little bit more RPOs because Matt Rule loves RPOs, which will open up more. So I really love Moore. I'm excited that you put him that high. And so I think that when you get him into that position where when you look at it, he's only one of 7 Panthers ever to have 1,000-yard season in his first 5 games were 100-yard receiving games in his career. I mean, this dude can play. And I think that he just doesn't get that love like other guys do just because he plays for Carolina. They have had trouble getting him the ball this year, but he still put up numbers this year. And when we're looking at just perspective of what he did this year, I still think he's a good wide receiver one to own.
Absolutely.
So, my 7th, I'm a little worried now because I don't know where you have him. But, mine is kind of tied into Josh Allen, and it's Stephon Diggs. It might be a little high for some people out there. And I know that depending on what you believe in him going forward. This season, looking at him, he put up monster numbers. Okay, he had 127 catches. He had 166 targets this season, which that is just insane. And touchdowns 8, 1,500 yards. And I just think him and Allen have something. I just think consistently, if you're looking at quarterbacks like we talked about, who do you want to pair him with? Him and Allen have been fantastic. Now, will he have probably a little bit of a decline from this year? Yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be something there. But even a decline there, I still think he's a top 5 in this offense. And if the ball stays, I think that's even better for them. If they get a better running back, maybe the targets will maybe go down a little bit. But I still think when you watch them, everybody keeps saying like, oh, the running back, they're going to run the ball more. I just don't think that's part of this offense. I think they do use that passing game scheme. They will dump it off to the running back. But really, him and Diggs, I mean, look at these games where you had 9, 12, 13 targets in these games. That's not going to go away next year or the following year. So like we said, I tend to be like you where I'm looking at, I play Dynasty 2 to 3 years, basically 2 to 3 years. And okay, I'm looking at it. If I can get Diggs, especially if I got Diggs last year for what I did, like I drafted him in the 7th round in a Dynasty league. When you're getting him at that value from last year, yes, this year it could still be a risk, but I still think he's a top 8, 7th in that Dynasty wide receiver.
Yeah, so I'm a little sick to my stomach because I did the rankings before I knew that Staley was going to be the head coach of the Chargers. I did the rankings with the expectation that the ball was heading to the Chargers, and that gave me at least a little bit of pause on Diggs. Now, when we talk about Diggs coming out of Minnesota, everyone was talking about, well, he's going to an inefficient quarterback. He wasn't the guy. Thielen was the guy in Minnesota, which is insane because Stephon Diggs was historically efficient with his targets in Minnesota. Like what he did with the number of targets he got, I don't think he got 100. I could double check those numbers, but he had such a low rate of targets and was still a high-end wide receiver too. Then he goes into an offense where he's a wide receiver 1. And like you said, you saw what happened on a per game basis, the number 2 wide receiver on the entire season in PPR. I have him too low right now. Now the question is how far too low? I don't know, but you're right. Diggs is that dude. And for that window you're talking about, he's the man. I love the ranking. I actually like your ranking of Diggs more than mine right
now. I appreciate that. Hey, I'm just trying to equal your intelligence, Mike. That's why I have you on here. You're way smarter than I am.
Not a chance, buddy. Not a chance.
When I have his numbers right now. So in Minnesota, he didn't have more than 100 targets except for 2 seasons. So out of 5 seasons there, he only saw more than 100 targets twice. That's coaching problem there. They got to get him the ball. But hey, I'll be honest. I drafted him this year because the value. I'm cheap, guys. I love value plays, and I'm a teacher, so I get shit for free all the time. Like I'm looking for value stuff, and Diggs was a value to me. And I remember in a league, I was in a charity league with Sam Wallace and all those guys, a teacher league, and I drafted them. And they said, "Didn't you know Josh Allen throws him the ball?" They were trying to beat Diggs before the season, and I said, "Yeah, I'll take him though." And look at how it worked out because you got to be, you always look at these changing of scenarios, and that's the interesting thing. Look at Hopkins and Diggs; they left. Everybody's like, "Oh, new teams, they could," and then looking at what they did. So Dynasty's no one's ever right. Like you just got to trust your rankings, trust what you see on the either tape or whatever you see, and just go with your gut. That's how I kind of play. I'm just a gut guy.
So I will tell you, like you guys can search my history on Twitter because there is a ton of wrong calls. There's a ton. So when I get a few right, I have to call them out. And one of my favorites was November 24th, 2019. I was asked a question, which was, who is the quarterback 1, running back 1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1 in Dynasty if you're doing a draft in the following year? So basically where we are right now, the end of the 2020 season. And I didn't want to be ridiculous and just name the guys who finished the top overall. So I decided to be a little contrarian. Now, the two that I maybe missed on a little bit was Amari Cooper at wideout and TJ Hawkinson at tight end. I think we can all agree it's Kelsey. And like I said, you're not going to get Cooper in my top 12 today. So maybe I missed. But the running back who was still in Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor, and dang, he might be there right now.
Yeah.
And the quarterback that I got laughed at, I got throw up emojis, was I predicted Josh Allen to be the quarterback 1 this year. And for anyone who threw the throw up emojis, he was number 1 this year. So all of you, I've been waiting for my apology. I've been sitting here drinking, waiting for the I'm sorries, because you were all wrong about Josh Allen, and Stephon Diggs was the recipient of that. But if you looked at Diggs, if you looked at his numbers, you could see it coming because of the efficiency and because of the lack of competition for targets. I mean, Smokey Brown, Gabriel Davis, you were never Cole Beasley. You weren't looking at people who were going to take away from him getting wide receiver 1 targets. And if he even came close to matching that efficiency, even predicting in the inefficiency of Josh Allen, you still had a wide receiver 1. And looking at it in hindsight, the numbers came out exactly as they should have if you paid close enough attention. I didn't. So just be honest, I didn't predict him to be a wide receiver 1, but hindsight being 2020, the numbers showed that should have happened the way it did.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's something that we use move forward. Like if you play Dynasty, you always got to adjust and like, okay, how did I miss that? What did I see wrong there? And like a deal that just went for Diggs, and we'll be quick on this, but Stephon Diggs for James Robinson. I would do that every single day. I'm not a James Robinson guy. You guys might be a James Robinson guy. I'm taking Stephon Diggs.
Okay, so let's talk about this, right? Because you probably were people that were also trading for Mark Ingram, Zach Stacy. Just stop.
I wasn't that. I wasn't that guy.
Oh, not you. No, I'm saying the people that make this James Robinson deal.
Oh, okay.
Stop it. Please. The whole offense is going to be different. They're bringing in Trevor Lawrence. They're going to focus on him. James Robinson did a very good job taking advantage of opportunity.
Yeah.
That's king. He was, a 93% snap share?
Yeah.
His red zone touches were through the roof, and he did a very good job with them. But you do not trade him for a cornerstone wide receiver. You don't trade a cornerstone wide receiver for that. You just don't. It's not repeatable. James Robinson will be a 3rd to 4th, maybe even a 5th round startup pick next year if he's lucky, and Stephon Diggs will still be in that top 2 rounds.
Yeah, no, that's how you do Dynasty wrong. So whoever got that deal, I like Diggs. I'm a big believer in draft capital. Undrafted free agent is not gonna, with a new coaching staff, new stuff. And then I don't also believe that Lawrence is gonna help out J-Rob. I really think that it's actually the opposite. I think Lawrence is gonna take away that usage rate, and it's gonna hurt him in the long run. So yeah, good job by you on Diggs. All right, I'm interested if we have the same 8 here. So what do you have for 8?
I have Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, me too. All right, yeah, we're on the same page there.
There we go. Ridley's numbers, realistically, he had a litany of injuries, and he had that game where he was basically a decoy, and a terrible Green Bay game, 5 targets, no catches, no yards. If you take that out on a per-game basis, he jumps up to like wide receiver 3. He's finally the wide receiver 1 in Atlanta. He was hurt by the quarterback play on his team. I just think that realistically, when you look at situation in Calvin Ridley, it can't get a lot worse than it was this year. And he still balled out. So I think when you look at a wide receiver that is attached to an aging quarterback, what you're looking for is, can they at least replace that value? You can replace 2020 Matt Ryan off the street. You just can. There was nothing there. So overall, when I look at Calvin Ridley, yes, he was on Jer Island. You were correct, Dale's girlfriend in that game. And I believe he was also battling a foot injury. So there's really no chance of him putting up big numbers there. But what you saw him do with no Julio was really, really positive for me. Like we talked about with AB and Juju, we talked about it with possibly Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. I wanted to see what Calvin Ridley did without Julio, and what he did was put up big boy numbers. He belongs in the top 10 now.
Yeah, and I think one other aspect of this too that you need to understand about what Arthur Smith is going to do now. He's the head coach there. You know, a lot of his scheme comes from Matt LaFleur from the Packers. So if you like what Devontae Adams is doing, you're going to love what Calvin Ridley can do.
Absolutely.
Because it's that same kind of run-based offense supplemented by like play action. I do think the Falcons will draft a running back, or they could maybe sign one, but I think they do draft one. And so you're going to get that play action. So like I said, in that scheme, he's basically Devontae Adams and A.J. Brown. And that's going to be Calvin Ridley. And I don't think you can go wrong from there. I love his targets. I mean, you mentioned a lot of that stuff already, but I mean, 143 targets. And he had a down year this year, to be honest, in terms of what his team did. And I can see his receptions going over 100. I think he's got a big year ahead of him. And I love Arthur Smith going to the Falcons. I think that's a great fit for him.
I love it. No, I'll tell you, I know Teo's talking about Aaron Jones as a possibility.
Could be.
Najee Harris is a possibility as well. I think what you're looking at is, when you look at the Arthur Smith offense, they do want to get that running back one. They will get that running back one, and that will only help Calvin Ridley. I think that will only make him stronger. And all you need to get him up into that top 5 tier is what you got from Adams, which is those 1 or 2 yard touchdowns on the play action fakes. Adams lived off of those. He had 4 or 5 this year. If Calvin can get 2 or 3 of those, all of a sudden he's a top 5 wideout.
Yeah, and I saw Calvin really go for Joe Mixon in a 2021 second.
That's disgusting.
If you
shouldn't be able to play anymore.
If you can do that, all for it. I mean, I'm a Mixon truther, but not that Mixon truther. I'm not that. That's just bad. Like if you're doing that.
That's gross. Yeah, that I hope it was his girlfriend or his sister or something he owed somebody to. It is collusion, and that's a problem. But
that could be collusion. That's a bad trade. I looked at that, and my eyes kind of hurt me a little bit. All right, who do you got at 9 then?
Number 9. I have CeeDee Lamb, number 9.
Okay, so CeeDee Lamb, that's a good spot for him. And we already went over him. Do you have anything else on CeeDee?
No, not really. We talked about it. It's really my love for Gallup that keeps him a little lower, but not too far. Obviously, I can't get him out of my top 10. He's that dude.
Yeah, and in my 9, and I might be a little low for you, is DeAndre Hopkins. I like DeAndre. I think he's great. I just think, I'm kind of an ageist, but like you said, I think in Murray's offense, I think they do get a better running back this year. A couple guys, I like Gainwell, the rookie. Maybe they get a different guy that maybe they can take away some of his targets. I think Kirk will be better. So I still have him in my top 10 guys, and I know we already kind of mentioned him, so we will kind of move on from there. All right, who'd you get for number 10?
Number 10, I have Scary Terry McLaurin, number 10.
Okay.
So if the Washington football team gets Watson, it's too low. If they sign Cam Newton, it's too high. So their rumors are so scary to me because they fluctuate, right? I've heard Cam Newton, in which case McLaurin's outside my top 15. I've heard Deshaun Watson, in which case he's in my top 7. It's such a scary situation. If they stay with what they have, some combination of that, and obviously won't be the exact name, but a middling quarterback, wide receiver 10 is about what you're looking for. I mean, this guy is as bankable as you get. He's a guy who, honestly, what I love for when I'm looking for my wide receiver ones, what I'm looking for is obviously that target share. I'm looking for the obvious nature of who's the best player. And in Washington, it's McLaurin and Gibson, and then a bunch of guys that we don't even really have to talk about on the offensive side of the ball, right? You have a nice piece in Logan Thomas, which, by the way, I always like pointing this out. He's 30. Please stop asking me dynasty questions about Logan Thomas. Please. He's not young. You just haven't heard of him because he tried to play quarterback and wasn't good at it. He's 30. No.
He had a breakout year as a 30-year-old, and everybody's like, wait, I got to draft Logan Thomas. And then you don't even look at his age.
Yeah, please don't. He's 30. But yeah, so McLaurin's a guy I just think I love when he's the focus of the offense. He's obviously a hell of a talent. He's not the physical freak that some of these guys are, but absolutely belongs, I think, in everyone's top 12, and I have him coming in right.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. He's not in my top 12, so you can yell at me if you like. And he's right.
It's okay to be wrong. It's fine.
He's right at like that 13. So I just the reasons why I didn't put him in my top 12 is because of this. Is I feel like that quarterback situation I need to get figured out. If it's Cam Newton, that scares the shit out of me. I'll cry deep inside. But if they can get like Deshaun somehow, they draft a quarterback, then I would value him there. He's close for me. His targets, and he really had a great year this year. Alex Smith, I love him to death. He had one leg, and he was just throwing to McKissick, and he was just kind of dumping and throwing it to Thomas and doing those type of things. And the fact that Terry was able to put up the numbers that he did with the quarterbacks that he had, that does show you something. And so he's not in my 12, but he's about 13 for me. So it's close.
Well, and you hit on it. If they sign Cam Newton, then you're right, not wrong. Plain and simple. And if they sign Deshaun Watson, you're going to wish you bought Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 10. I mean, that is the answer. So we're all kind of hedging our bets a little bit. And for me, like we talked about earlier with the 2 through 6, I mean, 10 through 13 is not that far off.
No, it's the tiers, right? It's to say this is where they're at. My 10 is DJ Moore, so I'm not too far away from you. But I have him at my 10 spot. We kind of already mentioned him, just the fact. But he could easily go in that top 5 depending on, who their quarterback is. So I'm buying DJ Moore. I have him down as my buy as well. Like, you got to try to get him now because I think his price next year is just going to be too high. And that's my there. All right, who's your 11?
Diggs. And to be honest, like hindsight, with the signing of Staley, I probably have him right about where Calvin Ridley was at 8. So we're probably pretty close to being of same value with Diggs. Like I said, I did drop him a little bit with what I thought was going to be a change in OC. That doesn't look to be the case now. So had I known that ahead of time, I would have probably had him at that 8 or 9 range. So I love everything you said about Diggs. I don't really have much to add other than my rankings too low, just given the news since I did the rankings this Sunday.
Yeah, no, and that was a surprising hire. I mean, I love the hire, but I just thought the ball was going there. Now, my next one is 11. We haven't said this guy yet, and that's our boy Michael Thomas. I had a hard time with this guy. I don't know where you have him at. He was wide receiver, 1, 2, or 3 last year, depending on who you ask, going into the season, and just a big change. I couldn't, out of my mind, not put him in my top 12 just because I think that he's still talented. I just think that this is one of those years. We've all had these years, guys, where it just nothing seems to work. Health, whatever was going on, people calling him slant boy. Obviously is, Sean Payton, he was kind of in the doghouse. For me, I still think he can put up the numbers that are consistent. If New Orleans gets it, not Hill, if Hill's not a quarterback, I know there's dudes out there that think Hill's a quarterback. He is not a quarterback. But if Jameis is there, I can see consistent now. The numbers that he put up 2 years ago in 2019 were astronomical. I don't think he gets back to that. But I still think he can get in that, his second year in the league, 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns, 100 catches. That's a pretty baseline number. And if he can maybe do above that, he can still finish as a wide receiver 1 in the league. I think that he's got 2 or 3 years left in terms of kind of where his production's at for a dynasty receiver. I think the big thing, he didn't score any touchdowns this year. So that's going to definitely hurt his numbers. That definitely looks a little different when you're looking in terms of perspective, in terms of regular season. So I'm interested to see where you have with Thomas. What do you think about Thomas?
So I have Thomas my wide receiver 13.
Okay.
So we weren't going to talk about him, but we might as well since you brought him up. Now I was talking to Kyle F. Africon today, and he was mentioning Michael Thomas, and my tweet was very simple, and I believe this wholeheartedly. I have Michael Thomas at wide receiver 13, and I will guarantee you one thing. I am either way too high or way too low on Michael Thomas, and I don't know which one it is yet. Yeah. I honestly have no clue. Now, I do think Taysom Hill helps him a little bit. His target share was actually better with Taysom Hill than it was with Drew Brees. So when you look at what he did this year, Taysom Hill brings him up a bit. But I agree, if you're going to a better quarterback, it can only help him a little bit more.
Yeah.
Now, the question with Michael Thomas is, did the league catch up with him? Is it something where because his route tree is so limited, they were able to scout him more? Because you weren't seeing a ton, save for this past playoff game, you didn't see a ton out of the wide receiver 2 position, whether it be Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway. You had a bunch of players who would step up here and there. The pride of Assumption College, Deontay Harris, who got hurt last year. You didn't see a lot there. And Jared Cook, let's just call it what it is. He's straight trash. Jared Cook is trash. And you saw it last night, but you should have known it beforehand. Just garbage. So is it a possibility that when you key on him, that he's just not that dude? He doesn't have that diversity that's going to get him open. And I think that becomes a problem, Michael Thomas. So that's really what I worry about. When you look at these guys who are limited, and I think from the quarterback position, you saw that a lot with Lamar Jackson, right? After a big year, teams start looking at the tape and saying, what are we doing wrong? And when you have guys that have tells, when you have guys that are limited, it's a lot easier to scheme against than like when you look at a Travis Kelce who's breaking Denzel Ward's ankles. You know, when you look at these guys who are throwing the kitchen sink at you, when you look at these tacticians, they're so difficult to scheme against. When you look at these guys that are pure speed, no matter how much tape you watch, you cannot run a 4.25. I don't care how much tape you've watched. Now, Michael Thomas isn't necessarily big. He's not winning on size like a Rob Gronkowski would.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily fast. He's not winning on speed like a Tyreek Hill was. And he's not necessarily that perfect route runner. He's not the Jerry Rice type. He's not the cut on a dime type guy. So when you look at that combination, the question I have with Michael Thomas is, did he have an off year or did the league catch up with him? That's where I'm at, like really an impasse. And like I said, that's going to prove out this year. And I'm either going to be way too high or way too low on him. But I have no doubt in my mind he's not falling where we have him. He will not be 11 to 13.
No.
He will either be in the top 5 or he'll be in 20 to 30. That's the problem, is we don't know which. So you almost have to buy because he could be the wide receiver 1 next year.
No, I mean, there's a couple things that worry me. Like his ADOT, which is his average target distance, is only 9.5 yards. That is not great as wide receiver, but that's who he is, right? That's kind of those weird things. Is like as a receiver, but like you said, he is a buy. I mean, literally, this just happened yesterday. He went for a late first, and Darrell Henderson.
That's ridiculous. That's insulting, to be quite honest. He's still a bigger guy than that. Come on now.
So,
come on.
It happened, and when you're looking at this from perspective-wise, that happened yesterday on the 17th. And if you can get kind of like that, if you can move Darrell Henderson for anything at this point, I would. And in a late first, I'm still looking at Thomas as being more valuable in a late first. And that's kind of those draft picks right now where you look. People love those draft picks. They love them. So you can always get the value there.
So let me tell you my favorite thing, right, is what happens right now. And especially if you have a commissioner who's a little bit behind. If you have not upgraded your league to 2021 yet, and you have a late first, whether it be 10, 11, or 12, offer now.
Yeah. Because
it doesn't have a tag on it yet. So it still shows up as a first, even though it's really a high second in a lot of ways, right? But Michael Thomas, when you look at what you're getting, and this is the problem, is that people, and especially this year, after what you saw this year, which was Justin Jefferson went at 201.
Yeah.
Well, sure, but Keyshawn Vaughn went at 10. Jalen Reagor went at 11. You had to not only have the pick, but you had to get that guy as well. And this is the year that people are overvaluing rookie picks because we had a historic season. And that's why usually I try to keep them. I try to stockpile them. This year I'm trading them. I'm trading them as much as I can because to expect the 2021 rookie class not only to perform at 2020's level, but at the speed that they did.
Yeah.
Now, I love Jamar Chase. I love this dude, right? But if you're giving me even odds on over-under of Justin Jefferson's season, I'm taking the under because nobody has done that before. Yeah. Not Calvin Johnson, not Michael Thomas, not Devontae Adams, not Tyreek Hill, not all these guys that you love. Nobody has done that year one. So if you're buying, expecting that to happen again, I think you're foolish. And I will tell you, like I made a prediction at the beginning of the year that Justin Jefferson would lead all rookie wide receivers in yards. And I would celebrate that, except the fact that I put a little asterisk and said none of them will get 1,000. So I was wrong there. But it's because you can't expect these rookies to produce. Yeah. So to me, like if I could get the DJ Moore for the Jamar Chase pick, I would do that every day and twice on Sundays. So this type of trade is embarrassing. 10, 11, 12 for Michael Thomas, a guy who was the wide receiver 1 year removed, is beyond ridiculous. He's still worth 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about what New Orleans is going to do. So, I mean, one of those things, I'm buying that they're going to go out actively try. They always like to compete. I know their cap's a mess. I don't understand cap room anymore. They figure that out. Like, That's for smarter people like, Howdy and all those guys to kind of figure out. But for me, when I'm looking at it, they're going to get a quarterback in there. Whether it is Jameis, they bring him back or not, or I heard talks that they're going to try to trade for Stafford. Could you imagine if they got guys like that for Thomas? Then you're
rocket ship.
Then it's rocket. It's out. All right, let's go to 12. Let's wrap this up and just talk about your 12th guy.
It's Chris Godwin.
Okay.
It's absolutely Chris Godwin. And to me, this is just ridiculous. He was a top 5 guy coming into the year, and now people are treating him like he can't play football. You talk about the drops, and certainly they have, but we can go through the drops of everybody that we have above him. Yeah. He also struggled with volume, especially after Antonio Brown joined the team and became Brady's roommate and became his binky, and that certainly changed the offense. Now, what we've done is we've gone away from a 24-year-old wide receiver because they signed a 30-year-old nutcase and a 43-year-old wide receiver who loves them. This is Dynasty. And if you're that fickle, you will legitimately play redraft, please, because you have no idea what you're doing. And this dude is still that talented. He's still the guy that we were talking about coming out of Penn State. He's still the guy with the situation. He's still going to get the volume. And Chris Godwin, even at 12, might be too low. But I'm putting him here because he showed some question marks. He showed some iffy play, right? But overall, this is a talent. He's got the situation. He has the coach. I think he's a steal of wide receiver 12.
Do you think he stays in Tampa, or do you think he's going to move on?
I think he stays in Tampa. Yeah, I think he's too big of a part of that offense. I think he stays there, and I think that he settles in really nicely. I don't think he was ever the top 4 guy that we were projecting, but I also don't think he's 12. I think he settles in nicely, like with that McLaurin-type player. I think if you were looking at McLaurin and Godwin are a very good example of a trade where, let's say, I had Antonio Gibson, for example, I was looking to diversify, I'd make that swap straight up.
No, that's fair. I have a good one for you. I want to see what you would do here.
Who we got?
Chris Godwin for Miles Sanders.
What? I feel like people are just trying to make me angry with these overvaluing of running backs. Chris Godwin, I mean, when you talk about a down year, it's not even close to what Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Come on now. No.
It happened. Then there's another one. Maybe you like this one a little bit more. Antonio Gibson and Cortland Sutton for Chris Godwin.
I love that. I love that. I would take Antonio Gibson and Sutton, and I would run away laughing because people forget how good Cortland Sutton is.
Yeah. So no, I think there's value there. It just depends on if your league's dumb. Actually, OBJ in a second. You could trade him for OBJ in a second. That happened. So
depends on where the second was. It better be like 201 or 202. It better be
top.
Yeah.
If you're doing that. All right, now I might make you bad for this one. My number 12, and listen, I know it's a little bit of a shock. There was someone that had him outside the top 50 earlier in the year. Is Deontay Johnson. So I'm expecting a big blowout next year for him. I expect him, like when I was looking at him, he had 10 different games this year with 10 targets. I think volume is key with my receivers, and I love volume. And for me, I think volume is going to increase if they don't bring back Juju, especially, which I don't know if they're bringing back Juju. They don't usually sign free agent wide receivers like that. I don't know. I just don't know where they're going to go with Juju on that one. But even with Juju, I mean, he had 144 targets this year. I'm not really that concerned with the drops. It is what it is. These guys, if I'm going to be worried about drops all the time, then I can't draft these guys. I think talent outweighs that. I mean, he finished really good this year. I know that he didn't have the yards that usually come with the targets, but I think that's more about Big Ben just not having an arm. I think they do kind of move on from Big Ben this year. I think that's kind of where my ranking goes. I think that they are going to get somebody else to come in there. And I think Deontay can be a wide receiver one on a team. He really reminds me, and I know that you just call him a nut job, but Antonio Brown, that kind of same mindset. I mean, really, I know it's a lazy analysis, but I think that he really reminds me of that kind of receiver and that kind of talent. And so for me, I'm putting him here just because I think talent-wise, I can get him this year for way cheaper and get him as a wide receiver one value. And it's kind of my hill I'm going to die on. I feel like that's my hill.
No, and I love it. My ranking of Deontay Johnson is because I think they move away from Big Ben. And granted, his arm isn't there, but the volume and the way they play football is a little concerning to me. I think because the thing I think they also move away from is James Conner. And if they move away from James Conner, do they focus on more of that smash mouth football that they're used to playing Pittsburgh Steelers football? And if they do that, does that volume go down? And do they ever roll with like a Mason Rudolph? And then all of a sudden the whole offense becomes trash, right? That's really where I have concerns with Deontay. I think while I don't hate it, I would say there's a group of wide receivers, and maybe we'll talk about a few of them now if you'd like, that I would have over him. But just throwing in a couple of names that I would have over Deontay Johnson just to kind of talk about where my value lies. T. Higgins, Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay, and Keenan Allen are a few names that come to mind of guys that I would have over Deontay. And again, not a smash over them, but that's why I have them more like in the 17, 18 range in terms of where I'm buying them. However, I think that your ranking is certainly in the range of outcomes. I think he has that talent. My ranking is more of a fear, not they just get away from Juju, but that they revamp the whole offense and go more smash mouth north football. And if they do, is the volume enough? Because like you mentioned, his efficiency per target is certainly considerably low. So if we drop those targets down to, 90, 100 targets, is he good enough to make up the difference? I don't think he is. And I think that puts him in that kind of 907 range, which really is, I'm more comfortable with that being my wide receiver too.
Okay, no, that's fair. I mean, I think that my understanding is just I think he's just talented and is one of those dudes that I just really love watching. And I really feel like if he can set it up, if they can get an offense in there, even if they get a guy, like Mac Jones or, I don't like Kyle Trask, so please don't draft Kyle Trask. But if they get somebody in, maybe even like they take a shot on Darnold, right? There's a lot of outcomes for me. Like, hey, where are they going to go? And I still think Deontay can kind of fit in there. And I just think his value for me is, and I like those guys you mentioned. They're right there. I mean, I'm taking a shot with Deontay. I'm putting my hat on it a little bit. You gotta go some risk every once in a while. But I wouldn't mind giving up a late first for Deontay.
No, I wouldn't either. And I think the two names you mentioned, if you told me they were getting Darnold or Jones, an accuracy guy,
yeah,
I actually would kind of love that for Deontay, to be honest. And I think this is where, we're hitting on a good point here, which is this grouping, the names we just talked about, there's reasons to love them and there's reasons to be down on them.
Yeah.
Like for me, out of that group, Kenny Golladay is the name that sticks out because I think he has top 5 wide receiver talent. I think he has the body. I think everything about him screams top 5, but he's coming off a hip injury. This is concerning, right? So I think all of them have that but, and we already mentioned Deontay's, the buts we have with him. So I think how you nail this grouping is hugely important to your team because one of the guys we just mentioned will finish in the top 10. You just have to figure out which one.
Yeah. No, and that's on you. I mean, for me, it's there. But no, you're 100% correct. Everybody's going to have a little bit of flaws there. That's why we're kind of, just picking and choosing. But I like that. No, that's good. Quick question, who's going to be the better wide receiver in 21, Gallup, Sutton, Visca, or Corey Davis?
Oh, man, I love Gallup and Visca. I love them, but Cortland Sutton, Steve.
I would agree. Sutton's my guy, and you can get him really cheap right now, guys. So I would definitely go out and get him. All right, good. No, hey, we went through our 12. I definitely want to go over. I know we're a little long, but I want to go over just some buys and sells that we have really quick. And I know we already talked about this guy, so I'll kind of go first. Is DJ Moore for me is a big buy. And obviously you mentioned why, but I think just based on what he's going for, I saw a DJ Moore and Harrison Bryant for CEH deal. That also happened.
It should have been CEH in the first, homies. Come on now.
Yeah, so I mean, if you can get him for CEH, if you have that depth, especially at running back, I'm not a big CEH guy, never really was. I would take DJ Moore there. So that's one of my buys. What about you?
So let's just talk CEH. I don't even need to see your roster. The answer is DJ Moore. So for me, we mentioned him quickly. My buy right now, coming in at wide receiver 20 for ADP is Kenny Golladay. Again, I play to win. I don't play to be 8-8. I don't play to make the playoffs. Now, investing in Kenny Golladay could hurt you, but you could also be looking at a top 5 wide receiver. So he's a huge buy for me at that price. I'm looking at him paying for maybe about top 12 wide receiver price, getting at top 20. Seems like an easy steal for me. Well,
you're going to throw up in your mouth a little bit on some of these deals. So Kenny Golladay for Corey Davis and Alshon Jeffrey. That happened in a dynasty league. Here's another one that I think is a little bit fair. Kenny Golladay for Brandon Ayuk, a second and a third. I still would take Kenny Golladay. But
I would take Golladay, but I do like Ayuk. Yeah. I think the problem with Ayuk is that he is so similar to Debo, and Debo hopefully will be over that foot injury. I think that splits them up. I don't hate the deal. The one before, again, stop. Just stop. That's actually embarrassing. Like
if you want to know where to find these deals, if you don't have a DLF subscription, I do. It's the Trade Finder, so it goes through all the My Fantasy League deals. So they're on there for those of you listening. It's a great investment. It's funny to do. I use a lot of this for my research for my articles.
Oh, I love DLF. It's absolutely worth the money. Those guys are the OGs. I've been a DLF member, I think, since 2012 or 13. I don't know how long it's been, but I've given a lot of money for a long time, and it's been worth it. So.
And another guy that I've been on all year, I love this guy. Me and Detroit BC have talked about him in every show that we've done. That's Gabriel Davis. He's starting to get borderline, though, a little pricey because everybody's talking about him being a buy. So, like, you should have bought him when I bought him, like, a long time ago. But, for me, even right now, though, when I was looking at some of the deals I've went recently, the last couple of days, Gabriel Davis, a second-round pick for Jalen Rieger.
Yep.
I like that deal. That's a really good deal for the guys that got Davis there. And then another one was Davis and Parham for Sony Michel and a third-round pick.
What? Yeah, come on.
So, if you can get Davis for that, Gabriel, this is an interesting one. Gabriel Davis for Kareem Hunt.
That is interesting because Kareem Hunt obviously could be a rocket ship in the offseason too.
Yeah. So, but I like Gabriel Davis. He's one of theirs. So, if you have another buy, let me know. If not, we can hear one of yourselves.
So I guess with the Gabriel Davis, Troy King just put out a really good article on fantasy intervention for him as well. Big fan. Again, one of my buys, and I'm going to stick with the top 20 just because I wanted to stay with the theme a little bit, is Keenan Allen. One of the things about Keenan Allen is that two things that have happened with Keenan Allen in the public perception, I'm not really sure how. Number one is that he's injury prone. Show me all those missed games because there's been 3.
Yeah.
And number two, that he's old. And last I checked his birth certificate, he's 28. And he's tied to Justin Herbert. And what Justin Herbert did was pepper Keenan Allen with targets, 15 a game peppering. Keenan Allen is that dude. Everything we talked about with Michael Thomas not being a precise route runner, when we talked about Michael Thomas, not having what it takes with his athleticism to the league could catch up on him. That's who Keenan Allen is. Keenan Allen is that route runner. Keenan Allen is that dude who is open over the middle all the time, tied to a stud wide receiver quarterback, and really doesn't have a ton on the outside. He has enough when you look at Mike Williams, when you look at Jalen Guyton on the outside, to at least take some pressure off him, but not too much that they're going to take up the targets. Hunter Henry's on a free agent deal. Keenan Allen, to me, still sitting at that wide receiver 19 is borderline offensive. So.
No, I love Keenan Allen. And what's crazy is you could have traded for Keenan Allen, probably got like a second beginning of the year or maybe a late first. And instead you probably traded 2 firsts for Michael Thomas, and you're sitting there shitting yourself because you're like, I could have had Keenan Allen getting all these targets.
Huge mistake.
And that's just one of those things you got to live with when you look at these things that he gets stuck with. Now, I want to stay with the Chargers. One of my sells is Mike Williams. I'm done with Mike Williams. I quit. I've been high on him for a long time. I still think he's talented, but the dude cannot stay healthy, and he just is inconsistent. And I'm tired of kind of what he's been able to produce out there. In terms of trades I've seen, I did see an interesting one today. Mike Williams in a second for Jerry Jeudy. I'm okay with that, giving up that capital for Jeudy because I still believe in Jeudy.
I do too. I think Jerry Jeudy is, unfortunately, he came out the year Justin Jefferson did. Yeah. But Jerry Jeudy's a typical rookie. He did what rookies do.
Yeah.
And that's what somehow hurt him in this historic year. But yeah, Jerry Jeudy, I would absolutely give up that capital for him.
Yeah. Do you have any sells?
Yeah. So my first sell we hit upon with the Cowboys, it's Amari Cooper. I don't know where he's going to end up. He has been a guy who's been boom or bust. He's been living off of that. Amari Cooper is that guy that people didn't want to give up on because they ranked him as the 101 his rookie year. And he's been good, but not great. He just hasn't been the guy that I'm looking to build a team around, and somehow is still holding his ADP. Like, he's still holding strong from an ADP perspective, which I can't figure out. He's just not a guy that I want to rely on, but he's coming in ADP right now at 39 overall, wide receiver 16. Way too rich for me. There's just not the upside that I'm looking for at that position. Like we talked about with Allen, with Golladay, those types of guys. I'd rather them than Amari Cooper, and you can get those guys plus for Amari, so I'm selling them every day.
No, I agree. I have one share, and I cannot get rid of him to save my life. I'm gonna have to take a hit, I think, just because I just what I want to get for him, I'm just not gonna get. He did go for DeAndre Hopkins in a recent, so it was Amari Cooper in a second round, 2021 second for DeAndre Hopkins.
All day.
Give me Hopkins all day. If that's what you can sell him for, I would love that. I can't even get a second for him right now. So I think it's just league dependent. It depends on if you got a Dallas fan in there that's not. If you have a Dallas fan that thinks Amari Cooper's good, I don't think so. So there's there. My other guy is Tyler Lockett. I'm selling him. I think it's time. I think if you can get rid of – now, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to sell him for max price just because of what he did this year, kind of the inconsistency. But he did go straight up for Michael Thomas. If I can get Michael Thomas for Tyler Lockett, I'm going to do that 100%.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that Tyler Lockett has been passed over. he's no longer the wide receiver one. And that offense, especially where they're talking about going more run oriented, as if they could get that much more run oriented.
Yeah.
I can't. I just can't with Tyler Lockett. So I love that. My other sell right now, and I'm just looking at the ADP, and it makes me physically ill. So Michael Pittman is wide receiver 40. Now, he's not my sell. And the reason why he's not my sell is because I love Michael Pittman. I love Michael Pittman. Wide receiver 38 is Denzel Mims. Wide receiver 43 is Michael Gallup. Now, why am I giving you these numbers? Because wide receiver 39 is Marquise friggin' Brown. Now, what football games are y'all watching? What planet are you guys living on that Marquise Brown is going at the same time as Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, Denzel Mims, Michael Pittman, Michael Gallup, Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, Christian Kirk? You want me to keep going? Gabriel Davis? I can tell you all the guys I'd take over Marquise Brown. And yet here he is. And I don't know why. He's 5'4", 112 pounds on an offense that doesn't throw the football, where he's not even the number one option. And he is garbage. And yet, according to ADP, I could trade Marquise Brown for Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, for Denzel Mims, for Gabriel Davis, your guy, for Michael Gallup, our guy.
Yeah.
Marquise Brown. Now, I don't know how this happened because I have Marquise Brown, unfortunately, an orphan, and I can't get a sandwich for him. Never mind Michael Pittman. But just given the ADP, just given where he came in January, and like we talked about, this podcast maybe isn't always the layman, but when we look at the actual layman and how they're drafting, this is where they're ranking Marquise Brown. It's embarrassing. I'm not even sure that he'll survive my rookie draft because I don't know if I have better options for cuts. That's how bad this guy is that I'm not even sure he's rosterable, and yet he's coming in that company. It should be. I think it's going to be my life's work to make sure that Marquise Brown never is in the same conversation as Michael Pittman again. I think that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my year. It's just make sure that never happens again.
I love that you brought up Denzel Mims because he did just go straight up for Denzel Mims in a league. So he went Marquise Brown for Denzel Mims.
Yeah, and the Mims guy won by literally a country mile, and it's horrible like that could possibly happen. This guy, Denzel Mims, is legitimately one of the most talented rookie wide receivers that came out.
Yeah,
and
I love him.
Waited a year to move him from Marquise Brown. That's not how you play.
I think, to be the devil's advocate, I do think Marquise Brown, if he had a better quarterback, he might be a safer option for people out there. Mm-hmm. I like Lamar. I just think he's very limited. We know that. But, I mean, he still had 100 targets this year. I think what's going to happen, though, he's going to get overdrafted because of the playoffs. So he had those games where he had 7 catches, 109 yards. So if this is a time to maybe sell him, like you said, this is probably it because – people are going to be like, oh, look what he did. He can do it. Because he did that same shit last year. And people drafted him. And we're like, wait, why is he only getting 41 yards? It's well, because he has Lamar Jackson in a heavy run scheme. Like, I don't know what you saw out there. But, yeah, Brown's a frustrating guy to have. I have him on one roster. And like you said, if someone's dumb enough to give you Denzel Mims, you got to go try to grab him. But, yeah, that ADP is still high. And why is that? I just don't get it. I just don't understand.
I think since he has a nickname, I mean, I don't know. Like, I love nicknames too. Like, it's pretty dope. But, I mean, other than that, you're literally getting 3 games where he's startable. We played 16. That is whack-a-mole like I've never seen. Like, I can't play that game.
Yeah. No, Marquise Brown's out for me. Until he goes somewhere else to maybe he could be there. I'm okay with that. But again, I think they're going to draft a receiver. I think they're going to bring someone else in. I think his target's going to go down. I mean, if Dez Bryant was getting targets away from him too, come on, guys. Like, I'm a Dez guy too, but we're doing those things. Now, do you have any more? I'm out, so I don't know if you have any more.
That's what I got.
And the last thing we're going to do, I know we're going to run against time here, but, I do want to talk about, we're not perfect for dynasty trades. I've made some doozies in my past, and we're just going to make fun of ourselves really quick. Just one of the worst trades we've ever done. For me, I traded a 2020 first for our boy Josh Rosen when he got traded to Miami because I needed a quarterback, and I was a big Joe Rosen guy. I thought he had the talent, but I was a dumbass, and I was completely wrong on that. And then that 2021 turned into J.K. Dobbins. And so that hurts me because I'm a Dobbins truther. So that was one of my bad ones. These happen, just know that. But I would say don't value quarterbacks too much in Superflex leagues unless they are one of the quarterbacks that you know is going to be a starter and will be going forward. That was my big mistake. That was early on. I was kind of still learning trades back then.
Yeah, so I did a similar trade actually for J.K. Dobbins, not knowing it at the time. And when Devonta Freeman was coming back from his injury, I traded Devonta Freeman for the pick. That turned out to be J.K. Dobbins. Now, two things. I didn't expect the team to have a pick that high. I thought I was trading a low first for him. And I thought that Devonta Freeman was going to come back to his running back one self and lead me to a championship. My team was one running back short. So, Devonta Freeman for J.K. Dobbins is really one that I'd like to get back. But, mistakes happen. This is what we do. And what I learned was, and this is why I'm cautioning you on James Robinson on running backs like that buying a middling running back in the offseason is always a scary problem. So.
Do not buy running backs right now, guys. Like I don't do that until after the draft. And even then, like if you guys bought Fournette, you're like, oh my God, what happened this year? That is true. That is it. Well, hey, you know what? I appreciate you spending some time with us today, on the pod and really helping people. I mean, if you guys aren't following him, you're making a mistake. I mean, this guy's going to have 20,000 followers soon. He follows everybody. He is the nicest guy. He always lifts people up. Follow up at Fantasy Intervention. Those guys join our circle. They're doing great things. They got great people over there. I just like to get invited to the club every once in a while just to hang out, and then I'll leave. But go ahead and tell us again where you can find you. But just what are you working on? Do you have any art? I know you're writing a little bit, so I knew that. But podcast maybe where we can find you.
So you find me at Daddy's Home FF. During the off season, actually, I decided to mix it up a little bit. So as you know, I was doing every Wednesday night on Fantasy Intervention with Chase, with Cooter, with all the hottest guests, and we had a blast. What I decided to do in the off season, I wanted to mix it up a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm collabing with a lot of writers who maybe you haven't heard of yet. People who are looking for their shot. So I think a lot of what you're seeing from growth over at Fantasy Intervention is me just working with some guys. We've been picking up a lot of different writers in the off season. So what you're going to see is probably some joint articles with me. Because the biggest thing that I want to do in the off season is get people their shots. There's been so many people that have helped me get to where I am. If you were talking to me in May, I had 75 followers, and most of them were my friends, my mom, and other such folks. I'm just kidding. My mom's not on Twitter. But I didn't know anybody, and people gave me a shot. So what I've decided to do with my off season is try to pay that forward as best I can. So I'm going to do a lot of guest spots. I've actually stopped doing my show. Chase and Steffi are doing, Wednesdays for me during the off season. And I'm going to do guest spots on different shows and get a lot of articles out with people maybe you haven't heard of, but are my secret weapons. A lot of the stuff that I get comes from folks that maybe haven't heard of, like Brad Bolt is my film guy. And he was telling me how Kyler Murray was tipping his running plays with the way that he was taking snaps and things like that. When he had like 80 followers, like he was just like in my DMs going, "Hey Mike, what do you think about this?" So that's really kind of what I'm looking for, is to find those people and give them a microphone. So it's kind of like that, what I was doing with the Timeline Takeover, only on a bigger scale, where you'll see my name plus this person on the article. So I think that'll be pretty dope. But yeah, I mean, I never expected to get here. Didn't do this on purpose, fell into it. And honestly, all I want to do is just kind of pay it forward. And honestly, getting opportunities like this, man, to talk to one of my best friends about football, this was dope, bro. I mean, we've been talking online for a while, but this is the first time we've gone live, and I had a blast. So this is this is awesome for me. Like, I get to pick where I go and have fun with the people that I like hanging out with. So, I'm a huge fan of yours. So this has been an honor, man.
No, yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And I just love positivity. You know, social media can be sometimes a cesspool, so it's always nice to find people out there that are growth, and that's what I love about your site. You know, you guys got a lot of good dudes there, and women. You know, I want to keep it. You know, everybody there is really great. Cooter makes me laugh like every single day of my life. You know, and so you know, follow them. Be sure to follow them. Listen to this podcast. I hope you guys listen to these rankings. I think it will help you guys when it comes there. I try to put in trades so you can hear kind of what you could get these guys for. As far as us, make sure you subscribe and rate. I really appreciate. You know, we actually hit the top 50 in 3 different countries for our podcast league recently. So we're really growing. And this week, a couple bigger guests, big guests coming on. Tomorrow we have someone talk about Texas A&M, and then this Friday we're talking about the Niners dynasty outlook. So you know, we start off with the best one with Mike, and we're going to work our way, and we're going to try to find some other guys, and we're talking about it. So I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you, Mike, for coming, and we'll have a good night.
Yep.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.